Hi everyone, welcome to COEX Talk. My name is Maria. Today we're super excited because we have Veronica Carbajal with us. And Veronica, thank you so much for creating a space or a time for us to talk to you. We are very, very grateful. So we want to start by learning a little bit about you, like an overall you, who you are. And then we would like to learn how, like your professional development and career, like what's your focus. And then later on, we want to talk to you about your position in politics, how you started to get interested, and of course, what's your input or your vision of the environment? So welcome. I'll leave it up to you a little bit and we'll keep on asking questions to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to learn more about the work that you're doing. I'm not surprised that it's women-led. I think that historically in our country, women of different backgrounds have been the ones leading the charge on environmental, especially urban environmental issues. And so in terms of my entry into the environment, I was raised, just to give you some background on who I am, I'm from El Paso and from Juarez, and my great-grandparents were from Mexico, and they met in the Chamizal neighborhood in the early 1920s, and that's where my grandfather was born. My great-grandfather was a railroad employee, so he walked about 2 blocks from where they lived to the railroad every day. But they wanted to buy a house, and this is like at the time of Jim Crow. It was the time of redlining. It was a time of really difficult, still to this day, right? But even back then, it was really hard for people to move out of poverty in the US if they were people of color. And so they went to Juarez to visit with some friends, and they saw a house that they loved. And so they bought a house. They even bought land, because as we all know, your dollars go a lot farther in Juarez. And so they did that about 100 years ago. And my great-grandfather would commute from Juarez to El Paso every day. And then when my grandfather was born, he did the same thing. And then my mom did the same thing. And then my mom had me out of wedlock. And my grandparents wanted us to be with them. I mean, my mom had the chance of getting public benefits and public housing. And my grandfather told her that she should leave that for someone who really needed that. So we moved to Juarez. My mom was a US citizen, but it was really hard for her to get good paying jobs because she didn't know English. And so she was a garment worker and then a cafeteria worker. And she wanted me to have better opportunities. And so we commuted every day so that I would go to school, and I went to public school in El Paso. And I graduated from Burgess in 1994, and then I went to Brown University. And the reason I ended up applying to Brown was
Burgess.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
We're
Yeah,
Mustangs.
a lot of really cool people. Yay, go Mustangs. A lot of really cool people have graduated from Burgess. Yeah, we have a lot of representation in different areas. It's a really great school. And grandparents, that house that that I grew up in was the land that my great-grandparents had bought, and I had a great house, great yard. I spent all my time outside. My grandparents were both really into nature. We could only watch PBS if we watched TV, and so before I knew English, I knew that I loved nature, and so I knew about butterflies and birds and all kinds of great things. And I was even told like the history of how the land had changed through the years and had become more of a desert. So when I was 13, my grandmother died of cancer, and then my grandfather died when I was 15 of cancer. And I really started to think about the environment and what it means for us to die from this terrible illness, even when we think we're doing the right things, right? They ate healthy, they had really good lives, they were very happy people. And so it really got me thinking about environmental issues from the environmental health perspective, not just loving nature, but also loving people and seeing the connection between the two. And so in high school, I had a really great counselor, and she said, I want you to think about your environmental, I mean, your what you want to study. And so I said the environment. And so she found Brown and said Brown has a really great environmental program. Let's apply there. And then we had a really good recruiter come and talk about Brown. And so my mom was totally up for it. She was very, very supportive. And I got in. And then when I was at Brown, I went into environmental studies. And right away, I noticed that the major had nothing about environmental justice, nothing about people of color, nothing about farm workers or any of that. So I talked to the professor who was in charge of the department, and I said, I want to work on this stuff. Can I do a research project with you? And he said yes. And so I included a lot of environmental justice issues in the curriculum, and that was my first, like, that was, I kept working with him on other things, just to make the major more diverse, because I think I was the first Latina or Latino to graduate in the concentration. Back in the 90s, it was still a very white, very rich, very affluent type of student who would gravitate towards that, and they were not focused on the things that I cared about. And so I really worked to diversify, to bring people in, and then I did my thesis on Chicanas and environmental justice. And I ended up, through my English professor, who was a Chicano, meeting people in Austin and then in Brownsville. And I looked at a recycling facility that was in East Austin. I don't know if you all know the history of Austin, but Austin, Texas was segregated by design in the 1920s. And El Paso had some of that too, like I talked about earlier. But back in the 1920s, a consultant was hired to divide the city by race. And so brown and black people were moved east of what we now know as I-35. And so they dealt with the power plant, but then they also dealt with a recycling facility. And in the 90s, we would say the 3 R's are reduce, what was it? Reuse, reduce, and recycle. And so to me, it was like, wait a minute, recycling is actually bad, right? We don't think about it as a process, but it is. So after that, I came home and I did air pollution work for a couple of nonprofits. And I found that everyone was focused on blaming Juarez and blaming individual drivers. Yeah. So they weren't talking about how to make the highways smaller or how to talk to El Paso Electric about going solar, or a Sarco, or the refinery. Like, no one touched the big players. It was all about Juarez. It was all about us driving too much. And so I needed to, I had a fellowship, and so I passed it up, and I ended up going to law school because I wanted to really address those kinds of issues. So I did environmental toxic torts for a law firm while I was in school, and then I got really lucky, and I got this job at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. And so I got to work on environmental justice cases right off the bat. I had the case against Asarco, the copper smelter. And at first we fought, to keep the air permit from being approved, which a lot of people were a part of that. And then afterwards, the workers were really, really sick. And they found out later that they had been exposed to hazardous waste. Mm-hmm. So we worked really hard to try to get them some justice, which we couldn't do. And then we worked on remediating the site. After that, I worked on a case against El Paso Electric in Montana Vista, which is a colonia, and we were trying to fight a power plant from coming in. And then since then, I moved into other things. I moved mostly into real estate scams and housing law that affects tenants in mobile home parks, and also like, slumlords and things like that. I've also been involved with the fight to save Duranguito. Yeah. I've been one of the litigators for over 3 years on that case. And yeah, so that's been pretty much like my environmental journey to this day. And I decided to run for office in the spring of 2019. Mm-hmm. And it was Enrique Moreno, who was one of my mentors, had talked about it for years with me, and I had said no. And then finally I said, I just can't anymore with these decisions. Like, if I don't at least try, if I don't make a run for it, like, all the things that we love are going to be gone. Yeah. Duranguito, Segundo Barrio, our historic neighborhoods, the Chamizal, which is constantly under attack, as well as the environment. Like, when we were looking at El Paso Electric, I found out that our power plants are one of the biggest consumers of water.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
huge problem because no one thinks like, oh, I turn on the lights and I'm wasting water. It's like, that's what happens because they need that water to cool down their towers. And so for me, whenever I look at an issue, I try to just break it down, like with the recycling facility, right? It was like, okay, well, this is a good thing, right? Because we are removing trash from the landfill and we are repurposing, we are, we have recycling means you use less raw material, but someone's paying the price for that process, right? And we always forget about who's paying the price for us to feel better about consumption. Well, it's poor people who live next to these facilities who deal with the traffic and the pollution and the fires, and we don't think about them. And this
Mm-hmm.
is happening right now in El Paso. There are recycling facilities in the Chamizal neighborhood that have fires, that have the traffic. I was there a couple of weeks ago and they have a junkyard. Like there is a car junkyard sitting in the middle of the Chamizal neighborhood now because W Silver recycles car parts. But it's ugly. It's like a junkyard. Who wants that, right? It's right in the middle of this area so close to downtown and no one is saying anything about it. But it's been a really great journey. This last year has been great because initially, my mom, when I told her I was running, she said, "What about your clients?"
Yeah.
And because she knows my clients, she knows my stories, and I said, "Well, now everyone can be my client. Now everyone can
I'll have
be
more
a part of
clients.
like what I yes, and it's been great, and I think for all of you because you understand these issues.
Yeah.
Like I think that policy work is really all of us need to focus on different things, but I do notice that with like the younger generations, they only care about policy.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of us who are like in our late 30s, early 40s, like we care a lot about individual action
Yeah.
and policy, right? But the younger generation, in some ways, like they're like, yeah, recycling is cool, whatever, but like really it's about the power plant. Really, and so it's like, it's great. And I think that we just need to kind of do all of the things at the same
All,
time if
yeah,
it's
like all
possible
of
without
the
getting
above
overwhelmed.
matters.
So,
That's
yeah.
wow. Well, congratulations on all the things you have done so far, and I am pretty sure you'll do even more. I wanted to ask you how difficult has been for you being a woman in politics in El Paso. Have you felt like because you're a woman you have not been listened or maybe disrespected or taken not seriously? And I'm asking this because I know in architecture I have felt that in some instances in my career, like, oh no, you look too young, or you look like you're a girl, I'm not going to talk to you, so with my experience, I'm asking you, like, how have you felt about being a woman in politics in El Paso?
I think I'm very, very lucky that I've practiced law for 16 years, so
Mm-hmm.
that I've been able to sort of, um, I'm not gonna, I can't say I've moved past it, but I can ignore it
Mm-hmm.
because I've had to deal with little things, and it's always been like tiny little aggressions. It has never been anything major for me, luckily, as a lawyer. But I think as a politician, I think most women, or at least I as a woman, have always felt that my uh, my body, my look is public property. So people feel very comfortable telling me how I should look, how I should do my hair, how I should dress. Like there's no filter. And I think that it's different for men. Men don't necessarily get that much feedback that's unmerited. Like I'm not asking people for their opinion. They just feel like they can tell me anything because I don't own who I am physically.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it's, when women are pregnant, people will touch your belly. When, even if you're not pregnant, people feel okay talking to you with their hands or like touching you. And it's like, I need a safe space. Like I don't, especially right now, right, with COVID.
Yeah.
Um, but so I think that that's been probably the biggest issue, is just people feeling completely unfiltered in their right to tell me whatever they're thinking about me. And most of it is not related to policy
Yeah.
or plans. It's related to these superficial things.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I have noticed, and I've noticed this not just right now, but in the past is how the mainstream media,
Mm-hmm.
not Spanish speaking, but the English speaking media tends to be very misogynistic, but not in like, they won't attack me as a woman, they'll just ignore me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've seen that with Duranguito. I mean, if y'all have followed Duranguito,
Yes.
the leader of Duranguito is a 92-year-old woman, right, who's Mexicana,
Yeah.
Antonia Morales. She's this viejita who is like so smart. She is so articulate and knows her history and knows economic development and knows all of these things. But like some stations have never interviewed her, right? They'll do like a KVIA extra with DeMargo and Max Grossman, two white men, but they will never like talk to the women. And another woman is Romelia, who's much more shy. So she's shy, but Antonita has never been shy. She'll talk to anyone. But they've never like sat down and said, this is a face of leadership. This is a face of power. This woman, you know, cleaned up this neighborhood 30 years ago, and now she's like not moving, even though she's a tenant with no rights. She's still there 4 years later. They don't give her that kind of attention. Whereas the Spanish language media, like Univision, Telemundo, El Diario, they have been, from the very beginning, they've given her a voice, and they've given women in our fight a voice. And I see that with the campaign as well, that they have, I don't know, for some reason, they're just like, they're proud of it, and they're happy to showcase that I'm the only woman in the race. And for some reason, the English stations, articles will come out, and I already know that they're, even though I spoke to the reporter, and they'll tell me, like, when I'm talking to them, like, wow, you spoke to me longer than anyone else, and this is all great. When it comes down to it, they're going to feature some other male candidate. They're not going to feature me. So we've had to, you know, do our own thing and make up for that. Um, in other respects, people have commented a lot on my age and the fact that I look younger than I am. I'm 44, and the campaign has definitely aged me. So I don't know that I look as young as I did a year ago. But I think that um, I think that even within my own team, they would say things like, use a picture where you look older, or like blah blah blah. And I'd say, like, look at these. I would pull up the you know, all the election materials that we get in our mail, and I'd say, look, these people are clearly using older pictures, right? I just saw them, like, they don't look this young. So everyone else is trying to look young. You're trying to make me look old. Like, let me just be. Let me just.
Yeah.
And so I think that as women, some people say you have to lean in. Like, to be realistic, you have to push your way in, and you have to grab the microphone, and you have to say, I want my 5 minutes, I want my 10 minutes, and you're going to listen to what I have to say. And time and again, when people hear me speak, they're like, oh wow, like, I want to get behind that. But the fact is that no one's going to give me the mic. Like, I have to grab it. And I've learned that at Legal Aid, because not only am I a woman at Legal Aid, but I'm like a poverty law lawyer, right? Like, I don't give to judges' campaigns, I don't do any of those things. And so when most of us, my colleagues and I, go into court, they don't know us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and we're coming for the little person, right, who has no power. And so we again have to like grab the microphone in court and be like, I'm going to say this 10,000 times until you understand that my client deserves whatever. And it's worked. It's that kind of a persistence that I think that as women, we have to work harder at that, just to be able to show that we are often more prepared than our male counterparts.
Yes, I'm also asking you this because lately I've had conversations with younger women, and they are very interested in politics. And I mean, I have never been a fan, but I know because I'm in the environment, I can't get away with it. I have to learn about it. And I think all of us, like, it doesn't matter that we're all from different fields. Like, we need to, because we're in the environment and this is a political issue. So I was very interested in inviting you because if younger generations feel that they need to be in politics, I want them to give them a role model, and this will be you, and you will be that for them, that they can, and that they shouldn't be afraid of doing it. And I feel like women lately, we have been working a lot more in in getting our voices out there. I think this is not only happening in politics. I can speak for myself, and it happens in the built environment. Like it's always the same thing. It's if you're in planning, if you're in architecture, if you're in any field, our voices are certainly like shut down a little bit. And we want to make sure that this doesn't happen, and not even for younger people, but also like there's older people that have struggled all along, and that they shouldn't give up. Like it doesn't matter what stage in your life you are, you should never give up on doing what you want to do. And it's, I mean, it's great that you're sharing this with us, and it's it gives us hope, and I hope this conversation gives hope to other women out there. um Claudia, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what got me so interested in the conversation, how you started it, I don't think we've ever had a candidate that knows how intertwined and married the two cities are between Juarez and El Paso. I don't think we've ever had a candidate that knows how it functions and how it works together, and how so many people live in Juarez and work here and vice versa. We have people that live here that work over there. My dad is one of them. And so I've always had that in the back of my head, that our politicians in Washington have no idea how interconnected and how it works and it functions. Nowhere in the world, even in other borders in Europe and other borders around the world, does it function like it functions here. Not even other borders in Arizona and other borders in Texas. Juarez and El Paso have a very, very unique situation happening in conjunction, and I can't think of the word, but cooperation, and it's worked for hundreds of years. And to have that knowledge in your blood, and to know that it's very important to work together, and that's the only way we're going to work through issues together, and recognizing the importance of both sides. I really think that's super important that you touched upon that, because that's how we get through things. And I think other candidates have never had the knowledge. Maybe they've lived here, but they've never really experienced how intertwined we are, and how businesses over here invest here and businesses here invest over there. So that's really, really important. I had a quick question. I don't know how much longer we have, but in an ideal situation, Veronica, what would be your ideal vision for El Paso?
Great question.
My ideal vision from an environmental perspective, and I think that all of you I am so happy that I'm getting to know you, because you all bring like so many cool things to the table. I think that my vision would be that we transform our culture. And for me, back in the 90s, it was really hard to live outside of my family bubble, because I was a feminist. I was an ally to the LGBTQ community from very early on, and I was an environmentalist. And so I was always talking about like these things that people don't want to hear, right? And I'm so happy that El Paso has changed, and more people are just aware and proud of being Latinx, and willing to talk about how complicated these things are. And my vision for El Paso would be, primarily because I'm so scared about it, that people would have a greater appreciation of the environment and their impact on it. And that we would redefine what success means in this community, so that people don't feel like they have to own 2-3 SUVs, they have to own a ginormous house, they have to have the latest whatever, and that our shopping malls would be replaced by other things. Like we're still pushing consumption in every way possible, and it doesn't make sense, right? Like, okay, so now the families have all the stores, but then you go up the street and you're like, oh, but then there's like an empty Ross building, and there's an empty this and an empty that. And to speak to the points that you have all brought up, I hope that with the pandemic, we're trying to redefine what space is and what space should be, and how we can minimize our use of certain spaces. Even at our office at Legal Aid, years ago, I asked them to look at their electric bill for our biggest offices because we're throughout the state of Texas. I was like, I almost cried when I saw how much we were paying in electricity. I was like, we could hire some people with this money. We could put food on people's tables with this money. Like, why are we paying this much in electricity? And it was because no one was keeping an eye on consumption. Like, people didn't care. Like, they're not at home, so they're like, leave the lights on, or we're not looking at weatherization. We're not looking at how we're constructing. Even now, like, I have friends who work at schools, and they're like, we would love to go back to school and maybe do ventilation and stuff, but we don't even have windows.
Yes.
Building, right? That we are so disconnected. And like I said before, I'm an environmentalist because I spent so much time outside, because I had people talking to me about the things that I was seeing. And so I worry that we're not doing enough for the, for folks to help them reconnect with the planet and with nature, and to start connecting the dots for themselves on illness, on our human illness and issues with what's going on in the environment, and empowering them to make a difference. Because, people will say the same things when you talk about the refinery, like, what about jobs? Like, what are you going to do about jobs? And I think that it's a complicated conversation, but we need to start having it and to start figuring out what kind of jobs do we want for people, what kind of jobs are going to be automated, maybe, what kinds of technological advances do we need to be pushing people towards so that we start moving in that direction. Because to me, I do want people to have better paying jobs, of course, but I also wonder, like, what's going to happen if they do? And are they going to go shopping more? Are they going to get bigger cars? Are they going to, like, versus going back to what you all are working on, which is community farming and sustainability at a very local level, that ultimately I think makes us happier people. I don't know anyone who's bought their way into happiness. Like, I just don't know anyone who's done that. But people try, they try all the time. And then to me, it's always like, oh, but the planet, So I think my biggest vision would be that we help transform our culture into one that is more environmentally sensitive and friendly and active. Lost Dogs showed us that people really do care, right? More people voted for Lost Dog than they did to elect DeMargo. And so that is striking, and that's a huge, huge thing. But we have leadership that has then taken more than 16 months to actually implement those protections that people were asking for. And we see that time and again. And so going to your point about getting people who are young interested in politics, I entered politics as a reaction, not as a passion. I was reacting to these things that I thought were horrible. But now that I'm in it and I see how many people are hungry for leadership that they can trust and for changes that are tangible, I think that more people should do it, because it is really beautiful. Like, once you're in it and you start to talk to people like you all, you start to see, like, there are more of us, and we do have the power to make these changes. And when politics goes from being a game that's played by the few and the rich to a game that is run with compassion and with creativity and some really good ideas, I think that's where we really can get young people engaged and thinking, like, I want to do that job, right? It's not a game, it's a job. It's a purpose. It's a thing that can be used to bring hope and change in a great way. And that's what I hope our campaign is doing. I'm not the first Latina to run in El Paso. Others who are amazing have run. They ran on different time scales than I did, because I've had a year to campaign. It's our first election for mayor in November. So that's really big and different. So we're gonna have more turnout, hopefully, and more interest. But I know I'm not going to be the last, and I just want people from different age groups to really get excited about what it means to be a politician in 2020.
Yeah. You touched upon really important points there, and one of our biggest things in COEX is small changes to make big changes, and one step at a time. then the other one is diversity. We've tried to recruit, and we've been successfully recruiting people from all backgrounds, a multidisciplinary backgrounds. That way we can reach and learn more from each other, because that's the only way I mean, same-minded people, we have to open up our minds and learn from other people. So that's really important for us. And another thing we do focus on COEX that's very important that you touched upon also is environment encompasses everything. It's not just saving the ocean, it's not just saving the earth, it's not just cleaning up, it's everything, because it affects our psychological, emotional, mentally, our kids, our health. I mean, it affects us in every way. So in turn, our environment is everything around us. So that's very important.
Yeah, adding to
Thank you.
what Claudia said, I think all of us who are environmentalists suffer from, we know where our planet stands, and it's so frustrating. And sometimes I get depression and anxiety for it, because I feel like I'm a little ant that's doing nothing, and I want to like do everything, and it's not my duty. And it's been a journey to learn that it's not my responsibility to protect the planet or save the planet. That's not what I came here to do. But we do have to focus on what we do ourselves and what we bring to the community. And that's one of the things that you sort of also touched upon. Like, you, if you want to help the community, you first need to understand everything that's happening yourself. Like, you cannot go out there and change a policy, which I've seen in a lot of younger people. Like, they want to do policy, but do you really understand at a very personal level what it is first? Number two, it's the attitude to how we do things. Like, if we have a very pushy or strict, or we want to modify things, like tell people what to do, it's hard. People shut down on you. It's like, no, don't tell me what to do. But how do you set up an example for people? So that's when you as a person need to change, because you have to be an example. One of the things that I have learned is, Claudia, everything you said, it, everything is connected. I'm like right now focused on agriculture, sustainable agriculture, because it starts from what we're eating, and people don't know what they're eating. And they don't know what they're breathing because they can't see it. They don't know what they're drinking because their water is clear. So I mean, I'm very happy that a person like you is leading El Paso in a way that you understand these issues at a very personal level. And that's something that not all people do, and not all people have. It's like a gift. So thank you so much for doing that, and we hope we can continue to work together in the future, no matter what it is. We wish you the best in everything that you do. We need more people like you. The planet needs more people like you. So thank you so much for everything that you have said today. As you say, it's very hopeful when you connect with people that have a similar experience or mindset as you. You feel like you're not a little ant. There's little ants together that can build up an ecosystem. So thank you so much. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add upon what I said, or the rest of the team.
I mean, obviously, Claudia and Maria have kind of touched on everything, but I did want to say, like, just you are truly an inspiration. And like, again, like being one of those that it's in El Paso and Juarez, like you have the understanding of both of that. And that's how we were all brought up. Like I lived in Juarez, I've lived in El Paso, and it's a beautiful community because of that. So I am really happy that you're leading by example. I think, just like we've said before, it's very hard trying not to tell people what to do, because it is very frustrating. I mean, we've been to different places and we've been, instead of enjoying the view, picking up trash just because everyone is leaving their trash. Even with COVID, we're like, we know we're not supposed to be touching this, but we're going to pick up this. So I think that is going to be very important. We focus on the education, and essentially what you're doing is you are educating people by leading, and by leading by that example. So again, I am really thankful for that, and very, again, inspired by everything you're doing. You do look very, very young, but I think that is the greatest part
That's
of things,
great.
that you are going to be able to lead according to everything that you actually believe and you've been working towards. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, true inspiration to us. We really like to work with you later on. If we can help in any way, we're here. I think I'm talking about all of us, that we will help in any shape or form.
Thank you so much. I feel like, I mean, I'm super inspired by all of you. I totally want to like get together and talk about the work that you've done. Yeah,
Let's get coffee.
Yes, and actually, I mean, and Maria talked about this. Like, it can be, people who are compassionate, especially when I think you combine compassion with environmentalism, we get really anxious and depressed quickly, right? Because like you just, it's hard to turn it off. It's hard not to think about the consequences and like, the impact that I'm having, like, and so I think that we're special people, and I think it's incredible that all of you, who are all women, fronterizas, have really taken this on. And one of the things that I've started to really think about is, how did we get here? Like, what influenced each of us to take this journey, which is not an easy journey, right? It's just not. Because I think that we need to make sure that the next generation has some of those same sort of experiences and lessons, so that we can keep this going and growing, because that's the only way we can survive, is if we're able to really help people tap into that. And to me, it's almost like I'm tapping into ancestral stuff. I'm tapping into what my ancestors taught me, and how they survived, and the things that they loved are the things that I tend to love as well. And so,
It's
yeah,
so
it's a
true.
different
It
conversation.
feels like when I started like very changing a lot about like my personal like habits to become more sustainable, if you want to call it that way, I entered this survival mode. It's like, okay, if the world is gonna end, what am I gonna do? If something happens, if there's like a hurricane or a tornado, what am I gonna do? Do I know how to survive? So I started to think about all these things. I need to learn how to grow food. I need to learn how to do my plants. I need to learn how to build my buildings. And so all these things started to like make sense, like, oh, maybe I don't need this anymore, and I need to focus my energy and my education on this other thing. So yeah, I know what you're saying, and I totally understand and feel you in that sense. And well, we hope that, I mean, my hope, and I am committed, when I started this path, is I'll do whatever I can and it's in my hands to do while I'm alive, to help whatever is around me. And hopefully that happens here in El Paso, because I believe that this city has beautiful people and beautiful things, and we need to tell people that what they really own is not things, but it's this landscape and this history and this culture and this connection to each other. So,
¿Puedo decir algo? Can I say in Spanish?
sí.
Bueno, Verónica, ha sido un gusto conocerte. Fíjate que hace como unas 3 semanas estuve en casa de una amiga y luego me dice, dice, mi hijo me acaba de traer toda esta publicidad de Verónica Carbajal, y luego me dice, me voy a poner a estudiar porque no la conozco bien, pero mi hijo me está insistiendo mucho y que vote por ella. Y llego aquí a la casa y como a la semana me dice Marife, mamá, contacté a Verónica Carbajal, nos va a dar una plática. Y yo pienso que en la vida no hay coincidencias, sino diosidencias. Entonces, por algo, Dios te puso aquí y me ha dado mucho gusto conocerte, el oír tu historia, el saber que estás involucrada dentro de las 2 ciudades, porque yo creo que es la historia de todos los que estamos aquí, el ir y venir. Yo soy de Chihuahua, y luego vine a vivir a Juárez, y luego al Paso, y luego a Juárez, y luego al Paso, y así me la he pasado mi vida yendo y viniendo entre Juárez y El Paso. Entonces, me da mucho gusto saber que conoces la calidad de vida que tenemos, que has vivido en Juárez y en El Paso. Entonces, sabes la problemática tan grande que hay dentro de las dos ciudades. Que estés involucrada en el medio ambiente y que tu perspectiva de política no es porque estás dentro de la política por ser política, sino porque te llevó a eso debido a los logros que tú quieres llegar dentro de sacar adelante la ciudad, de tus metas. Entonces me ha dado mucho gusto conocerte y espero que te vaya muy bien en tu campaña, y si llegas a ser la mayor de esta ciudad, pues cuenta con nuestro apoyo. Yo pertenezco a un club rotario y ahorita este fin de semana somos un club de rotario de puras mujeres, y precisamente este fin de semana tuvimos una plática estamos haciendo un proyecto de limpiar el río Bravo. Y ahorita que dijiste cómo limpiar el río, bueno, estamos empezando a hacer un programa que pero es todo el río Bravo a lo largo de toda la frontera. Entonces están involucrada gente desde California hasta Tamaulipas. Y me da mucho gusto que ya estés en la política, que seas mujer y que tengas esa visión de cambiar esta ciudad. Y te recomiendo algo muy importante, la educación en los niños, la educación ambiental en los niños. Es un programa que también queremos llevar a cabo, porque realmente si desde chiquitos los educamos sobre este tema, no va a ser tan difícil cuando estén ya grandes como uno, que Marifer viene y nos trata de enseñar cómo cambiar. Es difícil, y sí es difícil, y a veces hay pleito aquí familiar porque por el reciclar y el plástico y la composta, pero bueno, poco a poquito lo podemos ir haciendo. Muchas felicidades y gracias por haber estado esta tarde aquí con todo lo que nos enseñaste. Gracias.
Gracias, no, gracias. Agradezco mucho sus palabras y sí, estamos viendo que en la campaña estamos haciendo campaña con toda la familia, y muchas veces la gente joven es la que es la embajadora o el embajador que nos atrae a sus papás, sus abuelos, y así lo hacemos con el medio ambiente igual. El ser de Juárez y El Paso para mí es bien importante, porque como han dicho todas, no podemos dividir las dos comunidades, y los planes que yo veo en El Paso que son problemáticos van a ser implementados en Juárez. Entonces la gente trabajadora, la gente que se preocupa por el medio ambiente, por el arte, por la cultura, es la gente que va a ser olvidada una y otra vez. Entonces yo sé que lo que hacemos aquí va a ser reflejado en Juárez, y podemos, al contraste, podemos unir más a la gente. En mi campaña hay muchísimos artistas que se han unido que son de Juárez. Yo escribí un libro de niños, y el artista que lo pintó es de Juárez. Entonces yo sigo teniendo muchas relaciones allá, y me preocupa mucho mi ciudad, ¿no? Porque aunque no vivo allá y no voy tan frecuente como antes, sigo preocupándome por todo lo que sucede allá, y tengo muy en mente los cambios climatológicos allá y lo que significa para la gente, y más bien que hay muchísima gente que vive en la pobreza y que todavía no han superado eso. Entonces yo sé que podemos forjar más proyectos conjuntos de los dos lados de la frontera, y que nos lleven a todos a una comunidad más fuerte, ¿no? Porque yo sé que muchísima gente como yo ahorita está batallando porque no pueden ir a Juárez, ¿no? No pueden comprar su medicamento, no pueden ir al mecánico, no pueden ir al veterinario, porque no pueden regresar al Pasto tan fácilmente. Y no hablemos de las familias, ¿no? Que están divididas, es mucho más difícil aún. Entonces espero ganar, y espero poder forjar una relación siempre más genuina de lo que tenemos en este momento.
Muchas gracias.
A usted, gracias.
¿Ya? ¿Nadie quiere decir nada más? Claudia Rivera.
No, se me hace que ya cubrieron todos los puntos y todo el agradecimiento. O sea, sí, es una de las candidatas, pues para mí, mejores y más inspirational. Y espero que veamos eso en la gente, que se movilice como con Bernie, como con Beto. Pero pues, o sea, se me hace, ojalá y se vea ese resultado y que ganemos, porque hay muchas cosas que se necesitan atención, que han sido olvidadas.
Claro.
Y sí, luego especialmente ahorita con COVID, hablando de que la gente no está cruzando, o sea, están pasando muchas cosas por todo esto. Entonces, tener las dos comunidades, bueno, las tres, ¿verdad? Las cruces, Nuevo México, nosotros y Juárez, es muy importante ser todos unidos como una comunidad.
Sí, así es.
So, thank you very much.
No, no, ustedes, muchísimas gracias. Estoy súper contenta de haberlas conocido y espero estar en contacto muy pronto. Y gracias por el apoyo que le han dado a la campaña y seguimos adelante
Sí,
hasta que la victoria.
muchísimas gracias.
No, a ustedes, gracias. Espero
Thank you.
que descansen y que vean el debate que va a empezar en unos momentos.
Sí.
Gracias, Verónica.
Thank
Hablamos
you so
pronto.
much.
Sí, estamos en contacto.
Claro que sí. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.